it's definitely my parents. I mean, I can remember going to school with broken bones and my mom saying, well, you should still try to go, and I did. And it actually got to the point where she would have to make me stay home because I loved going to school so much, and she'd be like, no, you have too many broken bones right now. You are not going to school, you know, um, because school is something I was really good at. It was something I always made really good grades. It was something I really liked doing. So, I hated having to stay home from school. So yeah, it was definitely my parents, and just the fact that they worked so hard, and
Mm-hmm.
watching them work so hard. I wanted to be like that.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. On today's episode, we're joined by Katherine Klimitas. Katherine, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, Katherine, we like to start off every show by learning about the guests that we have on. So we're going to start off by asking, who is Katherine Klimitas?
Who is Katherine Klimitas? Katherine Klimitas I'm an artist and a graphic designer. I live right outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. It's actually easier just to say I live in New Orleans because it's really close. Um, I've been into art since I was very young, since I was about 5. I grew up with 2 parents who were veterinarians, so animals are kind of a big thing in my life. I have 5 dogs, and you may hear 1 or 2 of them during this interview. Hopefully not, but they're dogs. There's only so much I can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
And once one starts, everybody starts. So only so much I can do there. And I have a genetic bone disease called Osteogenesis Imperfecta, and it basically means that my bones break easily and they grow abnormally. So my life has always been a little bit different than most people's. I use a wheelchair for mobility. I usually have an aide with me all the time to do things like fix food and go to the bathroom and help me run my business. And so I work from home. I opened my business right after college. I graduated from Loyola University in 2011 in graphic design. So today I work as a graphic designer and an artist. So that's it in a nutshell.
There you go.
Right. So, Katherine, where did the passion for art come into play?
Well, I kind of like to say that art kind of won by default, because when I was really young, I couldn't do a lot of the things that my peers could do. I couldn't go outside and play soccer or baseball or go to parks with roller coasters and things like that. So my parents were constantly trying to find activities that I could do and that I liked. And my mom bought me my first watercolor set when I was 5. And I got hooked. I went through that set in a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever. And it turned out that not only did I like it, but I was pretty good at it too. And even, I mean, I was still 5. It wasn't like I was great at it, but, I had an affinity for it. So after that, my parents decided to put me in every art class they possibly could. So, of course, I had art in school, and I went to a mainstream school. So I took a bunch of art as much as I could in school, and then I, had summer camps. Every summer camp around, my parents got me in, and I also had some private lessons from a college professor starting from about the time I was 13. So I was learning on a college level at 13, basically.
Wow.
So yeah.
And I love that, right? Because I really believe as parents, we have 4 kids, that, you let your kids figure out, what they like, what their passions are and stuff like that. And then you help direct them
Yeah.
by helping them pull out those gifts and, the talents that they have, right? And
Right.
it's like, you see it, okay, you love this, let's do it. So
Yeah, I think some of it also is self-preservation for my parents because I was really bored and I was really smart and I was driving them completely insane. So I think anything they could find. I mean, I was speaking in full sentences before I was a year old
Wow.
because I didn't have to learn to walk or crawl or any of
Mm-hmm.
those physical things, right? So my brain jumped right to talking, which I'm very good at. So, um, I drove them completely crazy because I didn't get my first wheelchair until I was 2, which is very young to get a wheelchair.
Hmm.
Um, and I couldn't move myself around until then. And so, I was constantly saying, "Bring me here, show me this, show me," everything a
Hmm.
normal kid would do, right? And I just couldn't do it myself. So anything to keep me occupied, I think was the goal.
Now, I remember as well, just listening to some other interviews that you did, that by the time you were around 10 years old, you had kind of just basically at that point stopped counting how
Yeah,
many bones you had broken. So how
yeah.
did that impact, how you got into art, and did and I guess, is there any, did that lead to you, I guess, maybe gravitating to that more because it was something that you could still do,
Yeah,
when you were feeling the pain?
definitely. I mean, um, I mean, it would depend on what was broken, whether or not I could still do it at that point. But it was always something that I could do when my friends were doing other things, or when I just couldn't do anything else. Um, there was almost always a way for me to continue to do it, so that was really good. Yeah, I mean, it's just and people also ask me a lot, why did I stick to watercolor? Because I've gotten to dabble in a lot of different media, and I got to do that by the time I was a teenager, which was great. But I think part of the reason that I have always gravitated back toward watercolor is because I don't have to move a lot to do it. It's confined. It's small, and it's not super messy. It doesn't require, extra medium like oil requires all these chemicals, right, to paint with it. Um, and it's physically easier. It's just physically I can keep it more contained. So yeah, I mean, and that's what's great about art. You know, that's what worked for me.
Now, was there anything that, any specific event or series of events that made you realize that this was something that you could maybe make a living at?
Yeah, actually. So as I mentioned, my parents were veterinarians, and I would have to go to work with them on Saturdays, and sometimes during the week, but always on Saturdays. And I mean, being in a vet office is interesting, but after so many days, and when it's your normal life, it gets really boring. Um, and some Saturdays I had a kitten to play with or something, and that was fun. But otherwise, I was bored, so I would bring my paints to the office and paint the clients' pets while they sat and waited for my parents, and that was great. And then all of a sudden, these clients some of them started giving me money to do that. They'd say, "Oh, you're gonna pay whatever my fluffy dog. Here's $20, or here's $40." And as I got better, the prices increased. And by the time I was 13, 14 years old, I was actually like selling art, as an artist, and uh, that's really cool as a 13, 14-year-old person, right? Because my friends weren't making money like that, for sure. And that was great. So yeah, that was kind of the turning point where I was like, oh, this could work out for me, you know, because most people with my physical limitations end up at some kind of desk job, which is fine. I mean, there are plenty of jobs like that out there, but it's nice that I've been able to find something that's more creative and um, less left brain, because I'm not a very left brain person. So that worked out.
There you go. So, Catherine, I just want to talk a little bit about perseverance. So, you said you went to college, you have your own business now. Can you take us back to, like those teenage years, right? When you were trying to figure out what it is you wanted to go to college for. How did you, or where did you get that drive to pursue all this?
Definitely my parents. As you said, you find out what your kids want to do and then you nurture that, right?
Mm-hmm.
My parents definitely did that, and I'm very lucky that they did that. My mom especially was not and is not someone who ever lets you feel sorry for yourself. She's very tough, and they made me want to work. They made me want to be successful. They both owned their own businesses, so I grew up learning what it takes to run a business. So when I got out of college, it was just a lateral move. Like there was no, oh, maybe I should go work for a firm. Like that wasn't even a question. I always knew I would probably own my own business. Um, and I'm lucky because I got to see how that works growing up, all the good stuff and the bad stuff. So yeah, I mean, it it's definitely my parents. I mean, I can remember going to school with broken bones and my mom saying, "Well, you should still try to go." And I did. And it actually got to the point where she would have to make me stay home because I loved going to school so much, and she'd be like, "No, you have too many broken bones right now. You are not going to school." You know, um, because school is something I was really good at. It was something I always made really good grades. It was something I really liked doing. So, I hated having to stay home from school. So yeah, it was definitely my parents, and just the fact that they worked so hard, and
Mm-hmm.
watching them work so hard. I wanted to be like that.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
So can you talk to us a little bit about the experience of just going to school, because there's so many things that we take for granted, and I know I think back to some training I did at a hospital where we were focusing on accessibility because we are retrofitting our facility, and one of the speakers who came in was somebody who also relied on a wheelchair for mobility. And one of the things that she said that kind of stuck out to me was she was able to get into an accessible washroom, but then she wasn't able to get back out when she had a speaking event that she had to do. Right. So there's so many things like that I'm sure that we take for granted. Could you share some of that with us?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of that. Not in school. Um, but yeah, specifically in school. So I went to a private school for pre-K and kindergarten, and the reason, I mean, among other things, but the main reason I left that school was because my classes were going to be like in first grade. My classes were going to be on the top floor and they weren't going to make any kind of accommodation for me. They just said, "Sorry, we're not going to do that." So that was, I mean, there were some other issues with kids and parents and other things, but um, that was the main reason I left that school. I went to another private school after that from first grade to eighth grade, and that school was wonderful. I mean, it was a small school. There were about uh, somewhere between 300 and 400 kids in the whole school. So classes were small, and it was very family oriented. They made sure that I could physically get to all of my classes. They made sure that there were bathrooms I could use. They made accommodations for me having an aide with me all the time. And it worked. Of course, there were still times where it didn't work. I mean, like I couldn't do PE. Well, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing they could do about that. And I don't remember exactly what I did during PE class, but they had some other activity for me to do at that point. I don't remember what it was. But when the rest of my class would go on a field trip somewhere where I couldn't go, they would talk to my parents and they would come up with a field trip just for me. Where I would go do something else that would teach me the same thing but in a different way, and I would get to bring a friend or two with me usually. So like if they were going on a nature hike, um, the class would go, and then I would take two friends to like the nature center, which is,
Oh, nice.
it doesn't require hiking. It's more like a museum. So I would still learn the same things, but not have to hike. Right. Um, so that worked out really well. And then in high school, I went to a public school, and they were also great. They made, all the accommodations I needed. One of the things I needed was, and we can talk about this a little more in length later, but I lay down to do a lot of my daily tasks. So I needed a table that I could lay on in class. So, they made sure I had a table that was only mine, that I could lay on in each one of my classes. They made sure that I could transfer from class to class without being in the hall with everybody, because I am like right at backpack level when you have
Yeah.
backpacks on kids' backs. And that's not a great level to be at in a
No.
high school hallway. Um, and, that worked really well. And then college, kind of the same thing. I had a table in every room, and this was the best in college. My dad, this is just luck. My dad actually knew the guy who assigned the classes to the classrooms. And so, because he was a client of his. And so before every semester, he would look at the classes I was taking, and he would, put them in rooms next to each other, or as many of them in
Mm.
the same room as he could. So I didn't have to transfer all over campus, which was like wonderful. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, that was kind of dumb luck, but it was still really nice. Um, so yeah, I mean, and again, they made accommodations for my aide, me having an aide and all that. So I mean, aside from that first school, I really didn't have a lot of trouble with accommodations in school. Now, I will tell you that I live outside of New Orleans, and New Orleans is not the best city in the world for accommodations in general. I mean, they're getting there. They're trying. There's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years, but um, sidewalks are not great. There's not a lot of access ramps. There's a lot of really old buildings, so the bathrooms are not necessarily up to code because all these buildings are historic. So I mean that's all over though. So you were talking about that person who pulled into a bathroom but then couldn't get out. I have definitely been that person. I know what
Mhm.
that feels like.
So you talked about the benefits of being at school. I mean, geez, some kids even have a hard time, thinking back to childhood and all that, bullying and just trying to fit in, right? So it seems like you obviously had a really positive experience. Did you ever hear from your peers or teachers in regards to like how just having you in the class and, like again, going back to that perseverance and you showing up daily, even with broken bones, how that was like a positive effect on anybody else?
Yeah, I keep up with a few of my older teachers, my first grade teacher in particular, and my sixth grade teacher, and a couple of high school ones. And I mean, they do say that. They say that it was really good for the other kids to see how somebody who functions differently can still do most of the same things and still be successful. I have a really good friend who I have been really close with since first grade. And she always says, you were just Catherine. Like you weren't special. There was no like, your mom yelled at you just as much as our moms yelled at us. You got in trouble with us just like we did. And so, it just worked. And I think, I don't know if that would have worked as well in a bigger school. I think
Right.
part of why it worked so well is because it was so family oriented. But I can tell you that the kids I went to school with, they don't stare at people in wheelchairs in public. They're not afraid to go up to them and talk to them, um, because they grew up with me. So I
Right.
to them, it's not abnormal. It's just a little different.
Hmm.
So, and that's one of the things I do some public speaking on is school inclusion because
Hmm.
I mean that would be that would solve all of those stigmatism issues.
Yeah.
Like all of those stigma, all of those things that get, assumed about people who look different, all of that would get totally solved if you start at childhood.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the other thing that we probably kind of take for granted, again, not understanding, you're not having the experience of, you know, dealing with the disease that you have to deal with. Does that result in you being in pain all the time? Have you kind of adapted to that? What does
Oh,
that
yeah.
look like?
Yeah. I mean, there's not usually a moment where I don't have something that hurts. Um, I mean, there's a lot of moments where it's like it's low enough that I can ignore it, but I mean, it's almost always still there. Like, like for example, I broke my foot on Sunday, I think Saturday, one of those days. So yeah, like that's been kind of a pain this week. Um, but yeah, I mean, but it's something that I've dealt with my entire life, so it's normal for me. Like it's not like the people that I feel the most sorry for are the people that grow up with normal bodies, completely normal, able to do everything, and then they get into a car accident or some other kind of trauma, and all of a sudden they can't use their legs, or all of a sudden they can't use their arms or their legs, and that's a huge thing. That's a huge change, and I don't have a change. This is just the way I've always been. So yeah, I mean, I deal with physical pain all the time, but I mean, I don't know any different. So, I mean, I don't, it's kind of like, somebody who deals with, I don't know, depression, or some other challenge, or taking care of a sick loved one if they've done it all their life. I mean, that's their normal, and that's their challenge, and that's just the way their life is. You know,
Mhm.
does that make sense?
No, for sure, for sure. And it's interesting, right? Because you're saying you broke your foot on Sunday. Most people who break their foot, um, you're not gonna be going into work probably for a few weeks, right? Now you said you own your own business.
Hmm.
How does all of that, impact just your business, work? How do you keep going?
I mean, there are days where I definitely work slower. Like
Mm-hmm.
I happened to be on vacation on Sunday when this happened.
Okay.
Sunday and Monday. Luckily, I was off. But I worked a little slower on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, the biggest problem has been keeping my dog off of it. But um, work has not been nearly as big of a problem with this one. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are days where I say, well, and again, this is the beauty of working for myself, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, well, this didn't happen in a day. Like, I don't have to report to a boss that
Yep.
this isn't happening today. Now, with that being said, I do have clients with deadlines, and
Right.
it's very rare that I don't meet a deadline. It does happen. I mean, there are things that are out of my control, and
Yep.
sometimes it doesn't work out. But um, I'm one of those people that, especially with my work, I don't like to procrastinate because I know that a lot of times things can happen that will keep me from doing it. So I don't like to back up to a deadline. So more than likely, if I have a deadline tomorrow, the work has been done for a day or two.
Mm.
If I already had the material to do the work. Um, so yeah, I mean it's pretty rare, but it does happen. I had an accident a year and a half ago that put me out of work for 2 months. I mean, and it
Mm.
was like completely out of work, no work at all for 2 months. And then after that, it was like slow going back to work,
Wow.
you know. Um, and that doesn't happen very often. The last time that happened, I was a junior in college, which would have been 12 years ago, I think. 13 years ago, something like that. So I mean, once in a blue moon, but it can happen.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, just in terms of your actual day to day, so what is the business that you're involved in now? Like, I'm sure it still involves art, but
Yes.
you always hear about the starving artist. So, are you still painting to?
Yeah. So okay. So that's funny. You should bring that up. So I own my own business, which is CAC Art and Designs. My initials KAK Art and Designs. And so I thought when I went into college that I was going to major in fine art because I had already had college. A college professor teaching me privately. I was already ahead, especially in like the prerequisite class. In the basic classes, I was like blowing my classmates out of the water because I had already done them all, right? So it's kind of cheating, but whatever. Um, and I learned really quickly what it took, how much work physically I would have to put out to make any money as an artist unless I wanted to teach. And I have absolutely no patience to teach. I cannot do it. It is not in my wheelhouse. I have lots of people who said, "Oh, you should teach a class of kids." I'm like, "No, I would probably strangle them." So that's not a good job for me. Um, so I decided, like after my freshman year, to switch my major from art or fine art to graphic design, because graphic design allows me to work mostly on my computer, so I'm not
Mhm.
moving a lot, which is great, and B, it's more commercial, right? There's more opportunities for work, especially because when I was in college, social media marketing was just getting started, like really getting started. And so, there was this whole opening for making Facebook ads and Instagram ads and things like that. So there was more and more opportunities to create, to find a job in graphic design and to find clients. And so that's what I did. I switched my major. I continued to paint on the side, not as much in college just because I was so busy. Loyola's design program was very demanding, especially the last 2 years. So I didn't have a lot of time to paint extra, but after I graduated, I got back into it. And now what's really great is I can paint something and then I have the design knowledge to take those images and put them on products and sell them. So my business is kind of split in two because it's, graphic design for clients and then watercolor painting. But then they also kind of merge in the middle, which is
Mm.
great. So yeah, there's some overlap.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing I'm kind of curious about is, just kind of looking at your experience holistically. If you were able to go back in time, I like to kind of throw this hypothetical up, but if you're able to go back in time and have have some time to have a conversation with, say, 14-year-old Catherine, what would you tell her?
Ooh, 14-year-old Catherine was a freshman in college. I mean, in high school. Yeah, that was a horrible year. um, yeah, 14-year-old Catherine was really trying to figure out her friendship circles at that
Mm.
time because I was switching from this really small private school to a really large public school. I mean, not really large, but compared to the private one, it felt
Right.
really large.
Yeah.
And, I did have a lot of friends transfer with me, but I mean, you're a teenager, right? And girls are really mean. And you're meeting new people from other schools, friendship circles are changing, everybody feels left out at some point. It's and that was definitely the hardest part of being that age. But I think I would probably tell myself, this is everyone. Like, this is everybody goes through this. We have a neighbor that's 13 that's doing the same thing right now. And, she's, crying every few days because, you know, or not crying, but upset
Mhm.
because some friend did something and didn't include her. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that. but I don't know that it was because I was in a wheelchair or because, I have a disability or anything like that. I think it was just normal teenage girl stuff,
Mhm.
that every teenage girl deals with, you know. So, yeah, I would probably tell myself that the next few years would be a little bit difficult, but it would get a lot better, especially by the time I was a senior. So, yeah.
There you go. And then I'm going to move and ask a question about, just that you wake up in the morning, right? We all have to sometimes give ourselves pep talks in regards to like, even just getting out of bed sometimes, right? And getting all those things done on our to-do list. But like, what do you say to yourself on those days where you wake up and it's like, oh gosh, I really don't want to do this, or oh, I'm in pain? Like, how do you get moving every day?
Um. Well, I mean, I usually just say to myself, "Okay, it hurts. You're just gonna have to deal with it." But I mean, sometimes the thing that helps me is working because it distracts me from
Mm-hmm.
everything else going on. So sometimes that's um that's just the thing I need is to get up and get moving and just try to ignore what's going on with my body and you know get on with my day, because I'm also one of those people who, I say I'm not left brain, but in this way I kind of am. I really like lists and I really like to check things off of them. It makes me very happy to check lists. So like if I have my list for the day, and I don't get anything done on it, it's so frustrating. And I'm sure everybody listening who
Yeah.
makes lists understands like how you feel like a complete and utter failure at the end of the day if you can't check anything off your list. Um, so, just going down my list of stuff to do, that usually helps me too. And
Yeah.
and sometimes that list, I say, okay, well, I'm hurting too much to do this today, but I can get this done instead.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of days it's harder. Like if I'm in a lot of pain, I don't want to paint because it takes so much focus and so much concentration that sometimes I just can't. Like sometimes I'm just like I can't handle this today. Um, but I can do design work and I can work on my own social media work. Because let me tell you, marketing for yourself so hard. Like I can market so well for everybody else, but when it comes to marketing for myself, oh my god, it's ridiculous. Um, so yeah, so those are the days I try to take to do that kind of thing. And it all gets done eventually, and that's usually
Yep.
what I tell myself. It all gets done eventually.
Yep.
Yeah,
No, it's so true, right? And sometimes we can be in those positions where we feel so overwhelmed,
yeah,
whether it be by all the tasks that we have to do, or physically how we're feeling, and those lists, and just saying, you know what, let's just start somewhere, right? And I think that's the best way to get moving. And it's okay, start there, get that done, see where you end up next, see how you're feeling, see,
right,
all that kind of stuff, right? And then you keep going from there. And then usually it just takes a little bit and then we can get moving,
Right.
right,
I,
physically, emotionally.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say to myself, Katherine is doing this with, casually saying, I have a broken foot, right? And all of the other challenges. What's my excuse, right?
now look,
But on
no,
it,
I don't have to walk on my broken foot, so that helps a lot. Let's just keep that in mind. I mean, it's not the same as like you having one because you have to walk on yours, but I mean, it still hurts. But yeah, I know. I know. I actually wrote a book well, so I wrote a book in college for my senior thesis. It's called Looking Up, and it's basically everything we're talking about right now. So it's all about me and how I live with osteogenesis imperfecta and what it is, and um, it's funny stories about things that have happened to me because of it. And so I did all the photography in it, and I did the layout, of course, because it was a project for school. And then after I graduated, one of our local publishers actually picked it up and published it. So yeah, I mean that's one of the things I say in it is, it kind of makes me crazy when I'm dealing with, more physical pain than most people, and I'm doing more than somebody who doesn't have a challenge like that because they just don't feel like it.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing when they're not doing it because of some other reason, but when it's, they just don't feel like doing it, it's like, really? you know, that's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's all about that empathy, right? And we can give empathy, but when it's really like you just said, it's really hard if, let's say you're an able-bodied person and you're complaining you don't have any money, but you're not doing anything about it, right? It's
Exactly.
like, okay, well, or you want some extra money. Okay, yeah, you're working 9 to 5, but
Exactly.
like you have X amount of hours available to pick up something, right?
Right.
Like do it. You can do
Right.
it.
And I mean, if you're that person and you're working every hour you possibly can, and then fine. Then
Yeah.
you have a right to complain.
Yeah.
You know, that's like people who complain about pain, but they're not doing anything about it.
Mm.
That drives me crazy too. I know somebody who, they complain about whatever hurting. And I'm like, well, have you tried a chiropractor? Have you seen a massage therapist? Have you done physical therapy? Have you tried taking a different vitamin? I mean, well, no. Well, why not? I mean, you don't get to complain until you've done everything you
Right.
can to fix the problem. You know, that's yeah.
I'm pretty sure it sounds like a lot of things us parents say to our kids too, right?
Yes. And maybe they did not get told that enough from their parents. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
So, Catherine, do you know anybody else who has been diagnosed with
hmm
the same thing as you? Yeah. Okay.
Yep, I do. I know a couple personally, like in person, but there are like Facebook groups and message
Okay.
boards and stuff like that for people with this
Mhm.
this disease. But what's interesting about this disease is that the severity is like crazy different. So
Okay.
I have one of the more severe types, but there are people who only break one or two or three bones in their entire lifetime.
Oh,
And they
wow.
might be a little short, but they can walk. They may have some other symptoms associated with the disease, but I mean, they lead a relatively normal life, you know. And if you know what to look for, like there are certain characteristics we all have. And if you know what to look for, you can say, oh, yeah, that person has OI. But I mean, if you're not well educated in it, you wouldn't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, but then on the other side of that, there are people who, unfortunately, their skeletons don't develop, and so therefore their organs don't develop, and
Hmm.
they either die in utero or shortly thereafter. So I mean, it's a really wide range. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you know have you kept up to date, I guess, or track of how many bones you've broken or lost count?
Well, I mean, we stopped counting at 500 when I was about 10.
I
Uh,
okay, I saw that somewhere.
yeah, I don't really know. I mean, when one of the other things about this disease is when you hit puberty, you get hormones, a rush of hormones, and those hormones strengthen your bones a little bit. And
Okay.
so you don't break as easily
Mm.
as you used to, at least until you go through, another hormone change much later in life.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, when I was young, and I would say before, I don't know, 14, 15, it would take nothing to break my leg. Like I could just catch it on my mom's shirt sleeve wrong and it would break. Um, but now, I mean, it actually takes something, like it takes, like my foot was somebody accidentally sat on it, which
Oh,
was not ideal. But it takes like me falling or like somebody hitting me with something accidentally or the one thing I do still break relatively often is ribs just because the shape of my spine is really wonky to say the least. And so they don't move in the same way that yours do. So, like, if I sneeze in the wrong position or if I cough in the wrong position, that can easily break my ribs. So, I mean, that still happens relatively easily, relatively often. But as far as like major bones, like arms, legs, feet, whatever, um, it's it's not nearly what it used to be. I mean, it was rare that I went to school without some kind of wrap somewhere. Very rare. So yeah.
Well, in spite of all the challenges, you've been able to do some pretty interesting things. So, from what I understand, you did some work with Michaels. You were
Oh,
featured on like a day in the life thing. Can you
yeah.
talk to us about some of the other things, and obviously the book that you already spoke about? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, so the most interesting things I feel like I've gotten to do, and I mean I'm biased, but I I love live music. That's like, so when I was young, art was my hobby, but then it became my job. So like I don't ever paint. I won't say that. I rarely paint just to paint, just because I feel like it. I'm usually doing pet portraits, or if I'm doing some other painting, I'm thinking about what products it can go on and how well will it sell and how will I market it. So I rarely paint just for the fun of it. I rarely paint for myself anymore. So live music is my hobby. I love going to live music concerts. That's like my favorite place in the world to be. And so I've been very lucky that I've gotten to meet a lot of the artists that I have gone to see. And one of those artists was Rod Stewart. And I got to meet him 4 years ago, I think. 4 years ago. Total fluke. Just kind of happened, right place, right time. And I ended up doing some graphic design work for him. So
oh,
I
cool.
actually got to work with him over a 3 month period. And it was crazy. I mean, it was like, I'm just this little designer in New Orleans, and I'm working for Rod Stewart,
That's
and
awesome.
getting his feedback on design work. Like, that was completely insane, and super fun. And what's even better is we've kept in touch, and I get to, you know, go see him in concert this year again. So that's really exciting. The other thing that happened relatively recently is I was featured on Adobe Max's conference. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, Adobe, like Photoshop, like the company that owns all those big programs, they do a conference every year called Adobe Max, and it used to be in person, but of course, because of COVID, they've done it virtually the last couple years. And basically they have all these workshops and all these talks about the programs and what's going on in the design world. But in between, they decided to feature artists from all over the world. And they were doing these 10-minute spotlights on, and I mean, when I say artists, I mean dancers, painters, glass blowers, sculptors. I mean, any, theater, any kind of art you can imagine. And somehow I managed to get chosen for one of these spotlights, which, um, from what I understand, somebody dropped out at the last minute and they found me, and they already had a film crew in New Orleans. And so they had to find somebody really quick.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I
There you
don't
go.
understand why anybody would ever drop out of this unless they died, but whatever. It was great for me. Uh,
Yep.
but basically they came and followed me around for a day. Like, I had a 9-person film crew with catering
Wow.
in my house for an entire day. It was completely insane. But what was really cool was when it aired, there were like 40,000 viewers. You
Wow.
and I was talking to one of the producers, and he said, "Yeah, we just got back from Japan filming somebody." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Okay.
This is big. This is really big.
Yeah, it was really crazy. And it was great. I mean, it was great exposure. Um, yeah, the video turned out great. They did a great job. So I think they liked my dogs more than they liked me, but that's okay. But yeah, it was great. I'm trying to think of what else. I had a really nice article run in our local, relatively local paper. It goes out in New Orleans and then a couple of other cities close to here, and that was good. That was a really good media spotlight. But yeah, a lot of what I get to do, I mean, just simply that I've been able to provide an income for myself allows me to do a lot. And there are a lot of people with my disease that can't or don't do that.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to say can't for all of them because they certainly could. They just don't. Um, but yeah, I mean that I would say that's how art has, actually let me live a life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the Adobe thing for a second. Now, you said it was they spent the day with you. So this 10-minute spotlight? How long were they actually filming you?
Um, I think they got here at 10:45 or 9, maybe it was 9:45. Yeah, because they were supposed to be here at 10. They got here at 9:45 in the morning. We stopped filming at 8, but they didn't leave till after 9.
Oh wow.
So, I mean, it was a really long day. It was a really long day. It was fun. It was great. I've never known what goes into so much lighting in my life. Like, I mean, it took, an hour and a half just to get the lighting right in one room, and we were doing, it was a day in the life, but they kind of wanted it to look like multiple days. So, we were doing changing clothes
You
and
do.
changing scenarios, and I was painting some and then playing with the dog some, and then, just doing like daily tasks and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's on my YouTube channel. They did a fantastic job. I mean, it's Adobe. Like, I was like, man, this is awesome. But yeah,
Yeah, that is definitely a once in a lifetime thing. You really lucked out on that whole, in the right place at the right
yeah.
time and just being available and all that.
Well, what was crazy was they emailed me on like a Monday, no, a Tuesday night. They emailed me on a Tuesday night, and they're like, and through my website, right? So I'm like, is this a scam? Like, I mean, that's the first thing, right? I'm like, this is for real, And they're like, we'd like to give you more information. And I'm like, well, what can it hurt? I'll just say, yeah, please give me more information. But then it's like not a scam. Like it was a for real thing, and we had to turn around and film on Thursday because that's when the crew is here. So
Wow.
like I had to be, from Tuesday night to Thursday, the house had to be completely empty. I mean, not, but like I couldn't have clients here. I couldn't,
Yeah.
I had to change my schedule around, and yeah, it was crazy, but it was fun. I liked it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, next thing I want to ask, just because you're such a fan of live music. So, what was the last concert you went to? What's the next one you're going to?
So I can tell you. Wait, what did I? Oh, the last concert I went to was New Kids on the Block.
There you go.
Okay.
uh, and Vogue and Salt and Pepper and Rick Astley. Yeah, that was a good show. That was a very entertaining show. Um,
I believe it.
yeah, it was. I mean, the way they did the show, because it's called the mixtape tour, so they kind of mixed everybody up. It wasn't like one performer right after the other. It was, one would come out and then another one would come out, and
Oh,
they mix it up. It was really well done. Um, and then I am going to see Dirks Bentley on Friday next week. So I'm very excited about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's an outdoor venue, so it's going to be very hot. But
yeah.
because, this is South,
Yeah.
South United States, it's like 90 degrees outside. But that's gonna be a lot of fun. Trying to think before New Kids. What did I go see before that? We saw Luke Bryan at some point before that. Oh, Eric Church. We saw Eric Church before that, and he was great. I got to I mean, my mom does not approve of this, but I got to do a fireball shot with Eric Church at his concert on the big screen. So that was also super fun. Something I've gotten to do. So there you go.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
The whole genre of music, a whole bunch of different types.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love country music. That's what I grew up with. But I like a lot of other things too. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. So, just in wrapping up this conversation, Catherine, do you have anything that you're working on this year and any goals you have?
Well, I'm looking at doing some work with our zoo here, Audubon Zoo, which is like they're ranked in the top 10 or something in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a big Audubon Zoo is a big deal. They're going to be carrying my greeting cards here shortly, so that's really exciting,
That's
and
exciting.
that's something I've been trying to do for a very long time. So I'm very excited about that. And then I'm not sure. I honestly, I'm just now catching up from Christmas last year because I got I got so many pet portrait requests last year that I basically got to a point where I had to just hand people gift certificates to give to the people that they were getting the paintings for because I was like, there's no way. Like, there's no way it's all going to happen before Christmas. So I think I officially caught up though from that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. I had a big show at the end of last year at a museum here, and that was my first museum exhibit. So that was like a big deal. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm hoping. I mean, I'm hoping to get another one of those. The thing with museums in general is they book out a couple years. Um, so that may not happen this year, but that may be something I start talking to another museum about and
Mhm.
start painting for that. So I don't know yet. We'll see.
There you go. I love it. You can't get bored doing the work that you're doing because it's
Well,
like,
and the other thing is I've also been trying to kind of amp up my public speaking stuff
okay.
because we haven't been able to do it for so long.
Hmm.
I got to speak to a women's business group last week, and it was so exciting to see real people. Like,
Yeah, I know,
know,
right?
it was really good. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to do that as well. So yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Well, you definitely have a story a story to share, and many people can benefit from it. That's for sure.
Well, thank you.
And if you see our request, we have a mini golden doodle. So if you see Brian and
Oh
Tanya,
yeah,
it will be for Samson.
that's very cute. Just email me some pictures.
Yeah, that's
Have
awesome.
plenty.
Yeah. The other thing too, you mentioned your social media, so I just want to make sure before we end, can you tell us where we can find you on social media and all that fun stuff?
Yes. So my website is KAK Art NOLA, which is like New Orleans, Louisiana,
Yeah.
.com. So that's my website. And then I'm also CAC Art NOLA on Instagram and Facebook. And then I'm on LinkedIn. And I technically have um, a YouTube channel. It's not updated very often, but I try. So
Yeah,
you can check it out.
it's hard to manage it all.
Yeah, yeah, it randomly gets updated when I think about it. But yeah, Instagram and Facebook are the two that I'm the most active on. So you'll be able to see what I'm doing, and I put a lot of like painting process photos on Instagram, and when I speak to groups and things like that. So yeah,
Awesome.
Awesome. Catherine, thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing your story and some of what you're doing.
yeah,
And thank you for letting us disrupt your everyday.
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.